Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku joined the Young Avengers as their final recruit. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was coming apart at the seams, and Izuku Midoriya was at the center of the tear. Air didn't just rush past him, it warped, twisting into viscous, molasses-like currents that fought his every movement. The asphalt below him didn't crack under pressure, it bent like cheap plastic, buckling into impossible, non-Euclidean angles. Above, the sky wasn't a familiar blue but a churning vortex of bruised purple and sickly green, the color of a reality holding its breath. This was the quirk of the villain Distortion, a man driven mad by a power that unraveled the very laws of physics. And it was a nightmare to fight in. "Stay still, you little pest!" the villain shrieked, his voice echoing from 3 different places at once. He stood on the roof of a department store that was currently melting like a Dali clock, its windows sagging into liquid pools of glass. "Let me just redecorate!" With a flick of his wrist, a lamppost on the street below elongated, stretching like taffy before whipping towards a frozen-in-place family car. Izuku didn't hesitate. Green lightning, so familiar it felt like a second heartbeat, crackled around his limbs. He kicked off a warped wall, the surface momentarily solidifying under the force of one for all before dissolving back into a wave. Float. He hung suspended in the chaotic air, a fixed point in a world of flux. Tendrils of pure, black energy erupted from his back and arms, lashing out with pinpoint precision. Black whip! One tendril coiled around the stretching lamppost, arresting its momentum with a screech of tortured metal. Another 2 shot down, wrapping securely around the chassis of the car and yanking it backwards, out of the warp zone and into a pocket of relative normalcy. The family inside screamed, a sound that was blessedly clear and undistorted. Danger sense blared in his skull, a sharp, piercing alarm that cut through the disorienting environment. It wasn't a physical threat, not yet. It was a pressure building, a deep thrumming from Distortion himself. The villain was gathering energy for something big. "You heroes! You're all the same!" Distortion bellowed, his own body beginning to flicker and phase. "You want to keep the world in its boring, predictable little box. I want to show it its true potential, its art." He's losing control, Izuku thought, his mind racing, cataloging, analyzing even in the chaos. This was the pattern with overpowered quirks and unstable users. They pushed too hard, and the power pushed back. He'd seen it with Shigaraki, with Nine, with so many others. He had to end this now. His eyes, glowing with the emerald fire of his quirk, scanned the battlefield. The area of effect was growing. The fabric of space was thinning. He could see it in the way light refracted strangely, in the way sound became a muddled echo of itself. He needed to get in close, a single, decisive blow. He saw his opening. A momentary stabilization on the rooftop where Distortion stood, a flicker of solid ground. Izuku pulled his legs in, coiling his body like a spring. "Manchester!" He launched himself forward, a green comet streaking through the nauseating swirl of color. But as he flew, his danger sense screamed louder than it ever had before. It wasn't a spike or a jab, it was a sustained, deafening shriek of pure, existential terror. The pressure he'd felt wasn't for an attack. It was a rupture. On the periphery of his vision, he saw it. A young woman, a Hero Corps student from a nearby school by her uniform, had been trying to evacuate civilians on the edge of the battle. She had been too slow. A wave of Distortion's power washed over her, and she froze, her body caught between 2 moments in time, her expression locked in a mask of terror. Now the villain, in his final, desperate gambit, was focusing his entire power, not on Izuku, but on that single point. The space around her was beginning to fray, to dissolve into a vortex of white noise and raw energy. There was no time for a plan. No time for strategy. There was only the core, unbreakable tenet that had been hammered into him by every punch, every scar, every tearful promise. A hero saves people. He changed his trajectory midair, the force of the turn threatening to rip his muscles from the bone. He pushed Float and One for All to their limits, a desperate, gut-wrenching burst of speed. The world narrowed to a tunnel. At the end of it was the terrified girl. "I've got you!" he roared, his voice cutting through the din. He reached her a nanosecond before the implosion. His arms, reinforced with black whip for extra stability, wrapped around her. He used his own body as a shield, twisting to put his back to the vortex. He felt the rough fabric of her uniform, felt the tremors of her fear, and then he felt nothing, and everything. The world didn't explode. It was peeled back, layer by agonizing layer. First came the sound, a noise so immense it had no right to exist, the sound of a billion realities being born and dying in a single instant. It bypassed his ears and vibrated directly in his bones, in his very soul. Then came the light, a blinding, soul-searing whiteness that bleached all thought from his mind. Then came the pain. It was a physical and metaphysical tearing. He felt one for all flare violently within him, a supernova of power trying to anchor him to something, anything. The vestiges, the ghosts in his machine, screamed. It wasn't a warning this time, it was pure, unadulterated agony. He felt Nana Shimura's ghostly hand trying to hold on, her voice a wisp of static. Izuku. He heard the second user's gruff bark dissolve into a roar of defiance and pain. Don't let go. Fight it. He heard Yoichi, the first, the origin point, cry out as if the quirk itself was being ripped from its foundation. Brother. Izuku's own scream was lost in the storm. He felt the connection to the girl he was holding snap. He felt the ground, the sky, his city, his world being scraped away from him. He was a piece of data being cut from a corrupted file. And the process was excruciating. Colors he had no names for bled across his vision. Concepts like up and down became meaningless jokes. He was falling, rising, and standing still all at once. His body was stretched across an eternity, every cell screaming in protest as it was dragged through the raw, untamed space between worlds. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The torrent of sensation ceased, replaced by a brutal, unforgiving impact. Thump. Darkness. Silence. The smell of wet cardboard and decay. For a long moment, Izuku Midoriya knew nothing but the rough texture of asphalt against his cheek and the echoing phantom of the vestige's screams in his head. His body was a constellation of pain. His left arm, which had taken the brunt of a deflected attack earlier, throbbed with a deep, grinding ache. His back, where the vortex had hit him, felt like one massive, flayed-open bruise. He was pretty sure a few ribs were cracked. Standard battle damage, really. He'd fought through worse. He pushed himself up, his muscles screaming. His tattered vigilante costume, a grim mix of his Yue gear and Gran Torino's cape, felt heavy and damp. The metallic rabbit-ear cowl was askew, covering one eye. He shoved it back into place, blinking as his vision cleared. He was in an alleyway. A filthy, narrow chasm between two towering brick buildings. A single, flickering fluorescent light cast long, dancing shadows over overflowing dumpsters and puddles of stagnant, iridescent water. The air was thick and humid, heavy with the stench of garbage, stale beer, and something vaguely like roasted nuts. It was wrong. The smells of Musutifa were different, cleaner somehow, even in the back alleys. Hello? He called out, his voice hoarse. It came out as a croak. He tried again, louder. Is anyone there? The villain, is he neutralized? Only the drip of water from a rusty fire escape answered him. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the edges of his exhaustion. He checked his comms unit, pressing the button on the side of his cowl. SHHHHHKKKK. Static. Dead air. Uraraka? Ida? Anyone? This is Deku, can you read me? SHHHHHH. Nothing. He tried All Might's private channel. Static. Aizawa-sensei's. Static. The main hero network. Nothing but a low, empty hum. Okay. Fine. Comms get jammed. It happens. He just needed to get his bearings. He stumbled out of the alley, his boots splashing in the grimy water, and braced himself for the familiar sight of a Japanese city street. What he saw instead stole the breath from his lungs. He was standing on the precipice of a canyon of light and noise. Buildings, taller and more densely packed than anything he had ever seen, scraped a sky hazy with pollution. Their entire surfaces were alive, covered in gigantic, animated screens that blazed with an intensity that made his eyes water. They advertised things in a language he recognized, English, but for products and companies that were utterly alien. a glowing red and gold logo for Stark Industries. A sleek, sinister blue Roxanne symbol. A poster for some kind of musical about a man with a star-spangled shield. Thousands of people, a river of humanity, flowed along the sidewalks below. The noise was a physical force, a wall of sound composed of languages he couldn't parse, the blare of sirens that pitched and wailed in a completely different cadence to the ones at home, and the thumping bass of music from unseen speakers. The cars were different, the street signs were different, the very feel of the air was different. This wasn't a hallucination. This wasn't distortion's quirk. His danger sense was silent. This was real. Terrifyingly, incomprehensibly real. He staggered back into the relative darkness of the alley, his heart hammering against his cracked ribs. His breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. This wasn't Japan. He didn't know where this was, but it wasn't home. The screams of the vestiges, the tearing sensation. A reality-warping quirk. He mumbled, the words of frantic, desperate prayer. His analytical mind, his one constant comfort, kicked in, trying to build a framework around the impossible. The villain's quirk didn't just warp space, it tore it. A dimensional rift? Is that possible? The energy required would be astronomical. But if his body was a capacitor for the power, a temporary overload could cause a catastrophic failure in the local space-time continuum, creating a wormhole or an Einstein-Rosen bridge to a parallel universe. But the stabilization would be non-existent. It would be a one-way trip. A one-way. His own logic was leading him to a conclusion so horrifying he couldn't bear to face it. He was alone. Truly, utterly alone. More alone than he had been when he left Yui to protect his friends. More alone than he'd felt when he first learned he was quirkless. He was an anomaly. A ghost. A boy standing in an alley in a world that wasn't his. Tears welled in his eyes, hot and shameful. He squeezed them shut, balling his fists. No. Stop it. Crying won't help. Think. What would All Might do? The thought of his mentor was a fresh stab of pain. All Might was a world away. A universe away. The symbol of peace was gone, and in its place was only a lost, terrified boy in a ridiculous green costume. A new sound cut through his spiraling thoughts. A loud crump of shattering concrete, followed by screams. Real screams. Fear. Panic. The hero in him, the part that was more ingrained than his own name, reacted before he did. His head snapped up. His grief and fear were shoved violently into a box in the back of his mind. People were in danger. The where didn't matter. He limped to the mouth of the alley again and looked down the street. A block away, a bank's facade had been torn open. 4 figures stood there, laughing. They were large, cartoonishly muscular men. One wielded a crowbar that glowed with a faint energy. Another had a helmet, and was ramming his head into a police car, crumpling it like a tin can. A third swung a massive wrecking ball on a chain. Civilians were scattering, their screams painting a scene of chaos. Villains. They looked different from the villains at home. Less refined. More like thugs who'd stumbled into power. But the threat they posed was the same. Izuka's body moved. He didn't decide to. It just happened. He pushed off the wall and started running, his injured body screaming in protest. The box in his mind rattled, threatening to spill his terror all over the pavement, but he slammed the lid shut. Analyze. He ran low, weaving through the panicking crowd. His mind, a high-speed processor of combat data, took over. 4 hostiles. Enhanced strength across the board. The one with the crowbar seems to be the leader. The weapon is likely the source of their power, or at least a focus for it. Asgardian magic? No, the energy signature is different. Muted. The one with the helmet, brute force, likely invulnerable around the head. The one with the ball and chain, area denial, slow but powerful. The 4th one. He spotted him, a man with oversized fists, prying the door off an armored truck. Just another brick. They were strong, but they were clumsy. Uncoordinated. They relied on overwhelming force, not skill or strategy. He could beat them. Even injured, he could beat them. Get out of the way! The one with the crowbar, the wrecker, his mind supplied based on the theme, yelled, swinging the tool in a wide arc. A wave of force erupted, shattering the windows of a nearby bus. Glass rained down on the screaming people huddled inside. That was it. The time for analysis was over. Hey! Izuku shouted, his voice ringing out with an authority he didn't feel. The four villains turned, their expressions shifting from cruel glee to confusion. They saw a kid, a short, skinny kid in a dusty, torn green and black costume with ridiculous metal ears and a grim-looking respirator. Well, look what we got here, the wrecker sneered. Halloween came early this year, kid. Beat it before you get hurt. Izuku didn't answer. He just dropped into a low fighting stance, the familiar posture a comfort in this alien landscape. Green lightning began to arc around his body, kicking up dust and pebbles from the street. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone and burnt sugar. The villains' eyes widened. They had felt power before, but this was different. This was raw, untamed, an ocean of energy contained within a teacup. What the? Piledriver, the one with the big fists, muttered. What is that? Who cares? Get him! Bulldozer, the helmeted one, roared and charged, head down. He was fast for a man his size, but to Izuku, who was used to tracking the movements of heroes who could break the sound barrier, he might as well have been wading through mud. Izuku sidestepped effortlessly. As Bulldozer thundered past, Izuku dropped lower and swept his leg, channeling a mere 5% of one for all into the kick. It wasn't a damaging blow, it was a disruption. The kick connected with Bulldozer's ankle. It wasn't enough to break it, but the force was so unexpected, so disproportionate to Izuku's size, that it sent the big man tumbling. He crashed into a fire hydrant, which burst, sending a geyser of water into the air. Thunderball swung his wrecking ball, the massive sphere carving a deadly arc through the air. Izuku used float, pushing himself just a few feet off the ground, the ball whistling harmlessly beneath his boots. He landed lightly, the lightning around him intensifying. He needed to end this fast. His body wouldn't hold out for a prolonged fight. He needed to take out the leader. The wrecker. He focused on his right arm, the good one. He could feel the familiar, dangerous power of one for all pulling there, a caged star begging for release. He could feel the vestiges, silent but present, a weight in the back of his consciousness. 20%, he decided. Enough to neutralize, not to kill. Enough to make a statement. But his arm was already aching from a previous fight. He couldn't risk a full punch. A smash would shatter every bone from his fingertips to his shoulder. But he didn't need a smash. He flicked his fingers forward, a motion he had practiced until it was second nature. Delaware, a cannonball of pure, compressed air shot from his fingertips. It wasn't a wide-angle blast. It was a focused, piercing projectile. Smash! The wrecker, who had been raising his crowbar to bring it down on Izuku, had no time to react. The air bullet hit him square in the chest. It wasn't the force of the impact that did the damage. It was the kinetic transfer. The villain's eyes bulged. The air was driven from his lungs in a single, explosive whoosh. He was lifted off his feet and sent flying backwards, tumbling end over end until he crashed through the already broken window of the bank and landed in a heap, unconscious. The glowing crowbar clattered to the ground, its light fading to nothing. The other three villains froze, their jaws slack. The source of their power was gone. They were just thugs again, but Izuku wasn't done. The force of the Delaware smash, even at 20%, had sent a spiderweb of agony up his arm. Pain flared behind his eyes. He grit his teeth, pushing it down. He couldn't collapse. Not yet. He collapsed. The adrenaline that had sustained him vanished, and the full weight of his injuries, his exhaustion, and his soul-crushing despair came crashing down. His legs gave out. The green lightning sputtered and died. He pitched forward, catching himself on his hands and knees. The world swam. Black spots danced in his vision. He had won. But he was spent. He was done. It was then that they arrived. A flash of purple and a sound like a tearing star appeared in the middle of the street. A young woman with a long, dark ponytail and a practical-looking purple combat suit stepped out, a high-tech bow held at the ready in her hand. Behind her came a tall young man in a tactical suit of red, white, and blue, a shield strapped to his arm. Another girl, impossibly tall, phased through the side of a building, her face a mask of concern. And floating down from above was another girl with dark, wild hair, her fists glowing with a faint, stellar light. They stopped, taking in the scene. The cratered street. The geyser of water. The three terrified-looking brutes surrendering to the arriving police. The unconscious leader inside the bank. And in the center of it all, a small figure on his hands and knees, dressed in a bizarre green costume, his body trembling with exhaustion and pain. "Looks like someone beat us to the party," the floating girl, America Chavez, said, her voice laced with unimpressed confidence. "Power output was off the charts." The man with the shield, Eli Bradley, reported, his eyes scanning the collateral damage with a critical frown. "Unsanctioned meta-activity. High level." "Oh my God, is he okay?" the tall girl, Cassie Lang, whispered, shrinking down to her normal size. "He looks like he's about to fall apart." The leader, Kate Bishop, didn't speak. She slowly lowered her bow, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. She saw the raw power in the aftermath, the sheer force required to send a man like the wrecker flying. She saw the trembling shoulders of the figure in green. She saw the way his arm was bent at an unnatural angle, the bone clearly broken. She saw him finally succumb, his body slumping forward onto the asphalt, unconscious. The team moved in cautiously, forming a loose perimeter around the fallen stranger. The air still smelled of ozone and something sweet, like sugar caught on the edge of burning. It was an energy signature none of them had ever encountered. It wasn't magical, it wasn't cosmic, it wasn't technological. It was biological, but amplified to an impossible degree. Kate knelt beside him, careful not to touch him. She nudged his cowl back with the tip of her bow. The face underneath was young. Frighteningly young. A boy's face, round and freckled, now pale and streaked with grime and sweat. His green hair was matted with blood from a cut on his scalp. He looked like a kid who had just survived a war. The scale of it didn't add up. The power to take down the wrecking crew single-handedly, and the self-destructive cost of doing so. The alien costume. The fact that he appeared out of thin air and didn't exist in any known database. Eli was already running his face, and getting nothing. He was an anomaly. A puzzle box of contradictions. A weapon that bled. Kate Bishop stood up, her face a mixture of suspicion, awe, and a healthy dose of exasperation. She knocked an arrow, not aiming it at the boy, but holding it at a low ready, a gesture of preparedness. Her team looked to her for orders, for an explanation she didn't have. She let out a slow, controlled breath. "Okay," she said, her voice tight, cutting through the background noise of sirens and the murmur of the gathering crowd. "What the hell is that?" The first thing to return was the pain. It wasn't the sharp, screaming agony of the dimensional tear, but a dull, insistent, and almost comforting throb. It was the familiar pain of a body pushed beyond its breaking point. It was the pain of survival. Izuku Midoriya clung to it like a life raft in a sea of oblivion. He catalogued it, as was his habit. A deep, grinding ache in his left arm, a chorus of protest from his ribs with every shallow breath, and a tender, bruised landscape across his entire back. His head felt thick and heavy, as if stuffed with cotton. Next came the sounds. A low, rhythmic humming, like a powerful refrigerator. The distant, mournful cry of a siren, its pitch all wrong. The soft, rhythmic thump, 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 of something hitting a wall. And closer, the murmur of hushed voices, speaking in that sharp, angular language he now recognized as English. Then the smells. The rich, earthy aroma of brewing coffee. The faint, clean scent of disinfectant. The slightly dusty smell of old books and brick. Finally, he hazarded opening his eyes. The world swam into focus slowly. He wasn't on the cold, gritty asphalt anymore. He was lying on something soft. A couch. A ridiculously large, dark gray sectional couch that could probably seat his entire former class. Above him, a ceiling soared at least 15 feet high, crossed by exposed wooden beams and industrial-looking ventilation ducts. Sunlight, hazy and golden, streamed in through a set of massive, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto a dizzying vista of brick buildings and water towers. Panic, which had been lying dormant, began to stir. This wasn't a hospital. It wasn't a police station. He tried to sit up, a gasp escaping his lips as his ribs screamed. "Whoa, hey, easy there." a gentle female voice said. His head snapped to the side. A girl with blonde hair tied back in a messy bun was kneeling by the couch, a glass of water in her hand. It was the impossibly tall girl from the street, now at a normal, if still statuesque, height. Her face was etched with genuine concern. This was Cassie. Izuku flinched back, his body tensing for a fight he knew he couldn't win. His eyes darted around the room. It was a loft apartment, massive and open plan. One wall was exposed brick, and on it, inexplicably, was a huge, professional-grade archery target, riddled with purple-fletched arrows. Another wall was lined with overflowing bookshelves. In a corner, the young man with the shield, Eli, was methodically cleaning said shield, his posture ramrod straight, his eyes never leaving Izuku. The confident, dark-haired girl, America, was leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, looking bored. And the source of the rhythmic thumping was the leader, the girl with the bow, Kate, practicing her draw, her movements economical and precise, the bowstring thumping softly against her arm guard. Two others were there now, ones he hadn't seen on the street. A young man with dark, shaggy hair and kind eyes sat in a worn armchair, a book open on his lap, though he was watching Izuku intently. This was Billy. Beside him stood a tall, broad-shouldered blond boy whose calm demeanor felt like a rock in the churning sea of Izuku's anxiety. This was Teddy. They were all there. The team that had appeared after his fight. They had brought him here. To their base? Their home? His left arm was bound in a crude but effective splint, the break immobilized. They had tended to his injuries. But why? Anata wa dare disuka? Izuku asked, his voice a raw whisper. Who are you? Koko wa doko disuka? Where is this place? Kate stopped her practice, setting her bow down with a soft click. She walked over, her expression unreadable. She wasn't hostile, but she was radiating an aura of no-nonsense authority that reminded him, uncomfortably, of Aizawa-sensei. Don't recognize the language, Eli stated flatly from his corner, not looking up from his shield. Sounds Asian. Japanese, maybe? It's Japanese, Billy confirmed from his chair. I picked some up from manga. He offered a small, hesitant smile towards Izuku. We're not going to hurt you. Izuku didn't understand the words, but he understood the intent. Still, his training, his experience with the League of Villains, the constant state of paranoia he'd lived in for months, it all screamed at him. Trap. Ambush. Unknown variables. He pushed himself into a sitting position, ignoring the fire in his torso. He swung his legs over the side of the couch and, out of pure, ingrained politeness and desperation, he bowed his head deeply. Gomen nasai, he said, his voice cracking. I'm sorry. Maiwaku o kakitsima mason. Boku wa tada. I'm sorry for the trouble. I was just... He didn't know how to finish. I was just trying to help. I was just ripped from my own universe. I was just trying not to have a complete mental breakdown in the middle of your street. The young Avengers exchanged confused glances. Okay, the bowing thing is a choice. America drawled from the kitchen. Can someone get the Universal Translator app on my phone? This is getting painful to watch. Kate held up a hand. No. No phones. We don't know what he is. No connecting anything to the network until we get some answers. She looked at Izuku, her gaze sharp and analytical. She spoke slowly, as if to a child or a dog. Who are you? Izuku just stared back, his mind a frantic swirl of confusion and fear. He could see their mouths moving, but the sounds were just noise. It was hopeless. He was a prisoner, unable to even understand his captors. His eyes started to burn with the telltale heat of tears. He fought them back viciously. He would not cry. Not in front of them. America sighed, a dramatic, long-suffering sound. Oh, for the love of Kate, this is ridiculous. We're not getting anywhere playing charades. Before Kate could protest, America pushed off the counter. She walked over to Izuku, who instinctively flinched as she approached. Chill out, green bean, she said, her voice devoid of malice but full of impatience. She raised her right fist. For a horrifying second, Izuku thought she was going to punch him. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for an impact that never came. Instead, there was a sound like tearing fabric and breaking glass, and a faint, cool breeze washed over his face. He opened his eyes. America's fist was half-clenched, and in the space just in front of her knuckles, the air had shattered. A small, perfect, star-shaped hole hung in reality, no bigger than her hand. Through it, Izuku could see not the loft, but a swirling, kaleidoscopic nebula of light and color. It was terrifyingly familiar. It looked like the storm that had brought him here. "Little trick I picked up," America said casually. "Punched a hole into a pocket dimension where a Cree translation matrix was floating around. Just gonna piggyback off its universal language filter for a sec. It might feel a little weird." She flicked her wrist, and the star portal pulsed once, a wave of unseen energy washing over Izuku. For a split second, his brain felt like it was being unscrambled, and then reassembled. There was a faint clicking sensation behind his ears, a feeling of tumblers falling into place in a lock. And then Kate spoke again, and this time, Izuku understood her perfectly. "Let's try this one more time," she said, her voice crisp and clear in his mind, though her lips were still forming the English words. "What is your name?" Izuku's jaw dropped. He could understand them. He could understand everything. The wave of relief was so profound it almost made him dizzy. "You." "I can." He pointed a trembling finger at Kate, then at himself. "I can understand you. Yeah, we established that." "Your turn." Kate pressed, her patience clearly wearing thin. "Name, I am Deku," he stammered out. It was the name he had chosen, the name he had fought to reclaim from a childhood insult. It was his hero name. It was who he was. Eli let out a short, humorless laugh from the corner. "Deku? What is that, a brand of plant food?" "It means one who can do it," Izuku said, a flicker of his old fire returning. He looked at Eli, then at the others. "It's my hero name." That gave them pause. "A hero name," Kate repeated slowly, testing the words. "Okay. Deku. And where are you from, Deku?" "Because we ran your face through every database we have access to. SHIELD, SWRD, the Avengers Initiative files, Interpol, you name it. You don't exist." The cold reality of her words hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't just lost. He was erased. I'm from Yuzurifu," he said, the name of his home city feeling like ash in his mouth. "In Japan." "We checked," Eli cut in, finally setting his shield aside and giving Izuku his full, intimidating attention. "There's no record of any city called Yuzurifu in Japan. Or anywhere else on Earth." "No, that's not possible," Izuku whispered, shaking his head in denial. The box of panic in his mind was rattling violently now, the lid about to fly off. "It's a big city. It's near Yue High School." "Yue High?" Cassie asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Is that like the Avengers Academy?" Izuku stared at her blankly. "The what?" "No, Yue is the top hero training school in the country. In the world. It's where All Might went." He said the name with the reverence of a prayer. To him, it was a name that could move mountains, inspire nations, a name synonymous with hope itself. To the young Avengers, it meant nothing. They just stared at him. "All Might?" Teddy asked gently, breaking his silence. "Is he a hero we should know?" Izuku's world tilted on its axis. The idea that someone, anyone, wouldn't know the name of the symbol of peace was more disorienting than the dimensional travel itself. It was a fundamental law of his universe, like gravity. You don't know who All Might is?" he asked, his voice barely audible. The last of his composure began to crumble. This was wrong. This was all so deeply, fundamentally wrong. "Okay, I'm calling it," America said, pushing off the counter again. "This kid's either a pathological liar with a crazy backstory, or he's seriously delusional. Probably escaped from some secret government lab where they pump you full of super soldier serum and bad comic books." "No!" Izuku's voice rose, desperate and shrill. "No, it's real. My world, it's different from this one. 80% of the population has a superpower. We call them quirks. Society is built around them. We have pro-heroes, licensed by the government, who fight villains. We have schools to train them. All Might was the #1 hero, the symbol of peace. He gave me his power, he trailed off, realizing what he just admitted. He had just revealed the most sacred secret in his world to a room full of strangers. Complete, utter strangers who looked at him with a mixture of pity and deep suspicion. He buried his face in his one good hand, his shoulders shaking. The tears he had been fighting so hard finally broke free, hot and silent. The dam of his control had shattered, and all the fear, the loneliness, and the absolute, crushing weight of his situation poured out. He began to mumble, the words a frantic, incoherent stream of Japanese and newly translated English, his brain trying to analyze its way out of an emotional black hole. Dimensional translocation has a precedent in some fringe quark theories, but the energy signature would be unique. It wouldn't match local background radiation, so if they could scan for it they might be able to find the point of origin, but the temporal vector would be decayed by now. So maybe a chronal anchor is needed, but one for all is the only anchor I have, and it's screaming that it's untethered. So what do I do? What do I do? All Might, what do I do? The room was silent save for his quiet sobs and frantic muttering. The young Avengers looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Eli's expression was hard, convinced now that the boy was unstable. America looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. Cassie looked like she was about to cry with him. Kate's face was a stony mask, her mind clearly racing. It was Billy who broke the spell. He had been quiet, his eyes closed, his brow furrowed in concentration. Now, he opened them, and they were wide with a look of profound wonder. "He's not lying," Billy said, his voice soft but firm, cutting through Izuku's muttering. All heads turned to him. "Billy, the kid's talking about a world of superheroes like it's a geography lesson," Kate said, her tone skeptical. "He's clearly not all there." "No, listen," Billy insisted, leaning forward in his chair. He looked at Izuku, not at his face, but at his center mass, as if he could see right through him. "I've been trying to get a read on his energy since you brought him in. It's incredible. It's nothing like I've ever felt before." He stood up and slowly approached Izuku, his hands held out in a placating gesture. Izuku's muttering quieted, and he looked up at Billy through tear-filled eyes. "It's not magic," Billy said, his gaze distant. "It's not cosmic energy like Captain Marvel's. It's not a mutation like the X-Men. It's alive. It's powerful, yeah, unbelievably so, but there's more to it." He moved closer, his own eyes beginning to glow with a soft, pink light as he focused his magical senses. "It feels old. Not ancient, like the Earth's ley lines, but layered. Like a story. It has a history. It feels like multiple lifetimes, multiple energies, all woven together into a single, brilliant tapestry." He looked directly at Izuku, his glowing eyes filled with awe. "And it's connected to you. Deeply. But it doesn't feel like it started with you. It feels like you're holding it for someone else." Izuku stared at him, his tears forgotten. In a world where no one knew All Might, where his entire reality was dismissed as fantasy, this boy, this stranger, he saw the truth. He saw one for all. A single, shaky breath escaped Izuku's lips. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. "How?" Izuku whispered. "How can you know that?" "I'm a witch," Billy said with a small, wry smile. "Sensing weird energy signatures is kind of my thing." He gestured to the energy crackling faintly around Izuku, visible only to his own mystic sight. "You said your hero, All Might, gave you his power. What did you mean by that?" The question hung in the air. This was the moment. The final, most vulnerable truth. He looked around the room at the faces staring at him. Kate's sharp, intelligent eyes, now filled with a new curiosity. Eli's grudging skepticism. America's grudging interest. Cassie's open-hearted empathy. Teddy's calm, steady gaze. Billy's knowing look. He took a deep breath, the fire in his ribs a dull counterpoint to the spark of hope in his chest. "My quirk, my power, is called One for All," Izuku began, his voice gaining strength and clarity. He spoke of its origin, of the kind-hearted man with a useless quirk to stockpile power, and his tyrannical, all-powerful brother who could steal and grant quirks. He told them of the spark of rebellion, the fusion of two quirks into one, creating a power that could be passed down from person to person. It's a sacred torch, he explained, his hands gesturing as he lost himself in the epic, secret history that was now his own. A crystallization of power, passed from one generation of heroes to the next, growing stronger with each user. Each person who holds it cultivates it, and then passes it on to a worthy successor. I am the ninth holder of one for all. He looked at his own hands, one bruised and scraped, the other encased in a splint. I was born quirkless. A normal boy in a world of superhumans. I had nothing. But I wanted to be a hero more than anything. All Might. He saw something in me. He chose me. He trained me. And he passed his power. He passed one for all to me. The loft was utterly silent. The sheer, mythic weight of his story settled over them. It still sounded like something from a comic book, but now, filtered through Billy's senses and Izuku's raw, heartfelt sincerity, it had the ring of truth. An impossible, insane, dimension-shattering truth. Teddy was the first to speak, his voice filled with a quiet understanding. A legacy of power, passed down to be a symbol for others. I can understand that burden. As the emperor of a united Kree-Skrull alliance, he knew better than anyone what it meant to carry the weight of a legacy. So every time you use it, Cassie breathed, her eyes wide. You're not just using your own power. You're using the power of 8 other people, too, Izuku nodded. And their wills. Their spirits. They reside within the quirk. The vestiges, ghosts. America deadpanned, though her dismissive tone had lost some of its bite. Great. The kids haunted. Kate was pacing now, her mind working furiously. She looked at Izuku's broken arm, at the memory of the cratered street, at the sheer, overwhelming power he had unleashed. It all clicked into place. A stockpiling power, passed down through 9 generations of heroes. No wonder it was off the charts. It was an exponential growth of force. So this power, it's too much for your body, she stated, not a question but a conclusion. That's why you keep breaking yourself. You're a battery that's too small for the electricity it holds. Izuku flinched, the words hitting a little too close to home, but he nodded. I'm getting better at controlling it. I can use up to 45% now without breaking my bones most of the time, but in an emergency, sometimes I have to push harder. You used more than 45% to take down the record, didn't you? Eli asked, his arms crossed. His voice was still gruff, but the overt hostility was gone, replaced by a grudging respect. That air pressure shot, that wasn't a punch. It was a flick, a Delaware smash, Izuku confirmed quietly. At about 20%. But my arm was already injured from the fight, before. The silence stretched again. The pieces were all on the table now. A boy from another dimension, wielding a legendary, inherited power he can barely control, a power that literally breaks his body, driven by an ingrained, almost self-destructive need to be a hero. He was the single most powerful and most volatile asset they had ever encountered. Kate finally stopped pacing. She stood in the center of the room, the de facto leader making a decision. The team looked at her, waiting. All right, she said, her voice firm. I don't know if I believe all of it. A whole world of heroes, quirks, a symbol of peace, it's a lot. But Billy's never been wrong about this stuff, and the power is obviously real. The story fits the evidence. She looked at Izuku, her gaze pinning him to the couch. Here's the deal. We can't throw you out on the street. You're a minor, I'm guessing, and you're a walking WMD with a martyr complex. That's a bad combination. So for now you stay here. Izuku's head shot up, his eyes wide with disbelief. But, Kate continued, holding up a finger. This isn't a hotel. You are on probation. You will answer our questions. You will tell us everything you know about your abilities, and you will not, I repeat, not, go picking fights in the middle of New York City without our say-so. We have rules here. You operate with us, you operate under my command. Got it? It was an offer of sanctuary. A lifeline. In this terrifying, alien world, he wasn't alone anymore. He had found, if not friends then allies. A team. Tears welled in his eyes again, but this time, they weren't from despair. They were from a fragile, flickering hope. He nodded vigorously, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Good, Kate said with a curt nod. We'll try to figure out what you are and if there's a way to get you home. But first things first, she gestured to him. We're not calling you Deku. It sounds like a menu item. We need your actual name. He looked at the faces around him, this strange collection of young heroes who had taken him in. He was a universe away from everyone he had ever known and loved. The name Deku, the symbol he was trying to build, felt tied to that world, a world that might as well not exist anymore. Here now, he was just a person. A boy. He took a breath and gave them the one thing he had left that was truly his own. It's Izuku, he said, his voice quiet but steady. My name is Izuku Midoriya. The 2 days that followed were a surreal fever dream of fragile stability. The young Avengers, true to Kate's word, gave Izuku a place to stay. A place was the corner of the massive loft, where the giant gray sectional couch became his bed, his infirmary, and his island in a sea of overwhelming newness. He spent most of that time in a state of quiet, throbbing recovery. Cassie, ever the mother hen, kept him supplied with glasses of water, plates of oddly shaped pizza, and well-meaning but utterly alien American snacks. His splintered arm was a constant, dull reminder of his recklessness. The pain in his ribs had subsided to a tender ache, a testament to his accelerated healing, a minor, secondary aspect of one for all he was still getting used to. The team gave him a wide berth, treating him like an unexploded bomb they had reluctantly agreed to house. Eli Bradley, patriot, would watch him from a distance during his morning drills, his expression a mask of professional disapproval. America Chavez, Miss America, mostly ignored him, occasionally making a dry comment about his mumbling before disappearing through one of her star-shaped portals for hours at a time. Teddy Altman, Hulkling, was a calm, reassuring presence, offering quiet smiles but respecting Izuku's need for space. Billy Kaplan, Wiccan, was the most engaged, asking him tentative questions about the nature of quirks and one for all, his fascination with the metaphysics of it all. A strange but welcome distraction. And then there was Kate Bishop, Hawkeye. She was a whirlwind of focused energy, constantly moving, planning, training. She'd spend hours at the archery range, the thwack of her arrows hitting the bullseye a steady rhythm in the loft's background noise. She checked in on him not with concern, but with the cool detachment of a mechanic checking a volatile engine. Pain level? Any weird energy surges? You haven't accidentally punched a hole in my floor, have you? Izuku, for his part, was caught in a tug-of-war between profound gratitude and paralyzing anxiety. He was safe, for the moment. But he was also a burden. A charity case. An anomaly. The weight of it was suffocating. He tried to help, attempting to wash dishes with his one good arm, only to be stopped by Cassie who insisted he rest. He'd start to subconsciously analyze their fighting styles from his corner, his muttering earning him strange looks until he forced himself into silence. He was a hero without a purpose, a student without a school, a boy without a home. The feeling was hollowing him out from the inside. He needed to do something. He needed to prove he wasn't just a problem to be managed. He needed to prove he was worth the sanctuary they had given him. His chance came on the third day. The afternoon sun was slanting through the huge loft windows, painting long golden rectangles on the polished wooden floor. The relative peace was shattered by a piercing, high-tech alarm that made Izuku jump, his danger sense flaring in sympathetic response. A holographic map of Manhattan materialized in the center of the room, projected from a device on the coffee table. A single point in the financial district was flashing an angry red. What have we got? Kate asked, already grabbing her bow from its rack on the wall. Energy signature is weird, Billy said, his eyes glowing faint pink as he interfaced with their alert system. It's not magical, not technological in any way I recognize. It's temporal, fringes of chronal radiation, but messy. Unstable. Temporal? Eli questioned, snapping his shield onto his arm with a sharp thunk. Like calm? No, not clean enough, Billy replied, shaking his head. Kang's tech is precise. This is sloppy. Like a car engine leaking oil, but the oil is time. Got a visual, Cassie said, tapping at a tablet. An image flickered onto the main holo display. It showed a street corner near the stock exchange, but the image was distorted, rippling like a heat haze. In the center of the distortion was a creature that defied easy description. It was vaguely canine, the size of a grizzly bear, but its body was forged from a shimmering, gunmetal gray material that seemed to flicker and phase. Its limbs moved with a disjointed, stuttering motion, and its head was a featureless wedge from which a single, baleful red eye glowed. "What in the world is that thing?" Teddy asked, his own form shifting subtly, his shoulders broadening. "No idea," Kate said, her voice tight with command. "But it's causing chaos and the local PD are useless against it. It's phasing right through their cruisers. Let's move. Stature, Hulkling, you're on crowd control and containment. Patriot, you're on my 6. Wiccan, try to get a handle on that energy, see if you can disrupt it. America, you're our heavy hitter. Hit it hard, hit it fast." She didn't give Izuku an order. He wasn't on the roster. As the team moved towards the exit, gearing up with practiced efficiency, a cold dread washed over Izuku. They were leaving him behind. Of course they were. He was a liability. Injured. Unstable. He couldn't let that happen. "Wait!" he called out, scrambling to his feet. They all stopped and turned to look at him. "I can help," he said, his voice earnest, desperate. "I know I'm injured, but I can still fight. My danger sense, it's reacting to that thing. I can feel it. I can help you track it, predict its movements. Please." Kate's expression was hard. "No. You're staying here. You're not ready." "But that's the point," Izuku insisted, taking a step forward. "I'll never be ready if you don't let me try. I need to do this. I need to show you that I'm not just a problem you have to deal with. I'm a hero. Let me prove it." His eyes pleaded with her, a raw, naked sincerity in his gaze that was hard to ignore. He wasn't asking for glory. He was begging for purpose. Kate's jaw tightened. She looked at his determined face, at his splinted arm, at the desperate fire in his eyes. She remembered the sheer power he had unleashed, the analytical way Eli said he had neutralized the wrecker with a single, calculated flick of his finger. A weapon was useless if it just sat on a shelf, and maybe seeing him in a controlled fight was the only way to truly gauge what they were dealing with. She let out a long, frustrated sigh. "Fine," she snapped, the word sharp as one of her arrowheads. "Fine. You can come. But you are on a very short leash, you understand me, Midoriya? You are on observation only. You do not engage. You do not throw a single punch. You stay back, you watch, and you call out anything your danger sense tells you. You do anything else, you so much as spit in the villain's direction, and I will personally tie you to that couch for a month. Are we clear?" A tidal wave of relief washed over Izuku. "Crystal," he said, nodding so vigorously his head bobbed. "Thank you. I won't let you down, you'd better not," Kate muttered, turning on her heel. "America, you're not teleporting us. We're taking the Avan. I want him contained on the way there." The Avan, as Izuku learned, was a heavily modified, unassuming-looking white van parked in a nearby garage. The inside, however, was a mobile command center, packed with monitors, equipment racks, and reinforced seating. The ride downtown was tense and silent. Izuku sat strapped into a seat in the back, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He was going into the field again. For the first time in this new, terrifying world, he was going to be a hero. The chaos was palpable even blocks away. The air itself felt thin and staticky, and the sounds of distant sirens were strangely distorted, some high-pitched and tinny, others low and stretched out. When they arrived, the scene was even worse than the hologram had suggested. The creature, which Billy had dubbed a chronal hound, was rampaging in the middle of a wide intersection. It wasn't just its phasing that was the problem, its very presence was warping the local timeline. A car would flicker, suddenly covered in rust and moss, then revert to its pristine state. A puddle on the ground would flash freeze, then boil away in an instant. The hands on the clock face of a nearby tower were spinning wildly, sometimes forwards, sometimes backwards. "Okay, this is officially above our pay grade," Cassie said, her eyes wide as she peered out the van's window. "Doesn't matter. It's our problem now, Kate said, her voice all business. Everybody, you know the plan. Midoriya, you stay in the van until I call you out. Then you stick to me like glue. Got it, Izuku affirmed, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of his seat. The team deployed. Kate and Eli moved with tactical precision, using cars for cover. Cassie grew to her stature size, creating a perimeter to keep the scattering civilians back. Teddy, now in his full, green-skinned hulkling form, flew up to try and corral the beast from above. America Chavez simply strode out into the open, cracking her knuckles, a look of grim determination on her face. Billy floated behind her, his hands glowing with pink energy, chanting softly under his breath. The fight began, and it immediately went poorly. America threw the first punch, a blow that could shatter asteroids. But just as her fist was about to connect, the hound flickered, and her punch went right through it, hitting nothing but air. The momentum carried her stumbling forward. It's not just phasing! Billy yelled, his concentration strained. It's slipping between seconds! It's literally not there when you try to hit it! The hound retaliated, lunging at America. Its claws, shimmering with temporal energy, raked across the pavement where she had been standing. The asphalt instantly aged, cracking and crumbling into dust and weeds. From the van, Izuku watched, his mind racing. His danger sense was a low, constant hum, spiking erratically every time the hound prepared to move. It wasn't just a simple warning, it was a complex tapestry of sensations. He could almost feel the moments before it would attack, the strange, cold sensation of the timeline bending around it. He pressed the comms button Kate had given him. Hawkeye, he said, his voice tight. Its attacks, they leave a residual temporal field. It's weakest right after it strikes. There's a half-second window where it's fully corporeal. Copy that. Kate's voice crackled back. Patriot, on me! She and Eli broke cover. The hound lunged for Teddy, who swooped down to draw its attention. As it swiped at him, its claws passing harmlessly through his wing, Kate had her shot. She loosed an arrow. It was a perfect shot, aimed right for the creature's glowing red eye. But in the fraction of a second it took for the arrow to travel, the hound flickered again. The arrow passed through its head and embedded itself in the wall of a building behind it. The beast was learning. It was adapting. It wasn't just slipping out a phase to dodge, it was anticipating their attacks. Izuku watched, his frustration mounting. They were reacting. They needed to be proactive. His mumbling started, a low, unconscious stream of analysis. Inefficient. The temporal displacement is tied to its locomotion. It can't move and be fully phased at the same time. The flicker is a byproduct of its movement through localized time streams. It's not dodging, it's stepping around them. So a single projectile is useless. You need an area of effect attack, something it can't simply step out of. Or you need to hit it from multiple vectors at the exact same instant, overwhelming its ability to calculate a safe path. On the street, the fight was escalating. Billy was trying to weave a magical cage around the hound, but the temporal distortion was interfering with his spell work. The glowing pink bands of his magic would fizzle and fray as they got close. Eli threw his shield, but it clattered harmlessly through the creature's shimmering form. The hound, seeming to tire of their attacks, turned its attention to the containment line. It lowered its head and charged directly at Cassie. She stood her ground, a giantess of 30 feet, bracing for impact. Stature, hold the line! Kate yelled, but Izuku saw it. His danger sense didn't just spike, it screamed. A needle of pure ice shot down his spine. The hound wasn't just charging. The red eye was glowing brighter, the temporal energy around it gathering, coalescing into a focus point. It wasn't going to ram her. It was going to unleash a wave of that aging energy, and she was too big of a target to miss. There was no time to warn her. No time to explain his analysis. There was only time to act. He made a choice. The van door slid open with a bang. Izuku was a blur of motion, green lightning already crackling around him, even with his arm in a sling. Midoriya, stand down! That's an order! Kate's voice roared in his calm, furious and betrayed. He ignored it. The promise he made to her was secondary to the promise he had made to himself long ago. He would save people, no matter the cost. He pushed one for all into his legs. 45%. The highest he could safely go without shattering them. The pavement cracked under the force of his launch. He wasn't just fast, he was a missile. He covered the 100 yards between the van and Cassie in less than 2 seconds. He could see the wave of shimmering, gray energy erupting from the hound's eye, washing towards Cassie's giant, unmoving form. He could see the confused look on her face as she saw him streaking towards her. He wasn't aiming for the hound. He was aiming for her. He hit her leg like a cannonball. "Sorry!" he yelled, wrapping his good arm and black whip tendrils around her ankle. He planted his feet and pulled with every ounce of his 45% strength. For a giant, Cassie was surprisingly light on her feet. The unexpected force was enough to unbalance her. She let out a startled yelp and stumbled backwards, tripping over her own feet and crashing down onto the street with a ground-shaking boom. She fell right out of the path of the temporal wave. The energy washed over the spot where she had been standing, and the asphalt aged 1,000 years in a second, turning to a patch of black, cracked dirt. Cassie, safe but dazed, shrunk down to her normal size, staring at the patch of dead ground, then at Izuku. The rest of the team stared, stunned into silence. Izuku had just saved her life. He had also flagrantly disobeyed a direct order. The chronal hound, its attack having missed, let out a frustrated, glitchy howl and turned its baleful red eye on the new, tiny, green annoyance. It recognized the energy signature. This was the anomaly it had been sent to track. This was its primary target. It lunged far faster than before, its jaws snapping at Izuku. Izuku was ready. His mind was a crystal-clear lake of combat calculus. The fear was gone, replaced by the familiar, high-stakes focus of battle. He could feel the hound's movements in his danger sense, a precognitive echo in the timeline. He sidestepped the lunge, the creature's shimmering teeth snapping shut inches from his face. He didn't have a free arm to punch with, but he had his legs. He spun, channeling a burst of power into a kick. St. Louis smash! He aimed not for the creature's body, but for the street right in front of it. His foot, glowing with green energy, impacted the asphalt. A shockwave erupted, blasting upwards into the hound's underbelly. The creature, caught mid-lunge, was thrown off balance, stumbling sideways. It was a solid hit, but the temporal field had dampened most of the force. This was it. The opening he had seen in his analysis. A multivector attack. "Now!" he screamed, not into the comms, but to the heroes around him. "Hit it from all sides! Don't give it a path to step around!" His desperate, commanding yell broke them from their stupor. They didn't have time to question him. They reacted. Kate, already anticipating, had an arrow knocked. She loosed it at its left flank. Eli hurled his shield at its right. Teddy swooped down from above, claws extended, and America, a fierce grin finally on her face, charged straight at its head. 4 attacks, from 4 different directions, all converging on the exact same microsecond. The chronal hound's head whipped around, its red eye darting between the incoming threats. For the first time, it seemed confused, overwhelmed. It flickered once, twice, trying to calculate a safe path, a moment to slip into. But there was none. Every direction was a threat. It was trapped. America's star-powered fist connected with its head with the force of a meteor. Teddy's claws raked its back. Eli's shield slammed into its ribs. Kate's explosive-tipped arrow hit its flank. For a moment, the creature became fully solid, its shimmering form hardening into pitted dark metal. And then, with a deafening crunch of tearing metal and a final, screeching wail that sounded like a corrupted audio file, it imploded, not in a shower of sparks, but in a silent cascade of gray dust that quickly dissolved into nothing, leaving behind only the smell of ozone and old clocks. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. The temporal distortions vanished. The air returned to normal. The clock tower resumed its steady ticking. The fight was over. The young Avengers stood amidst the debris, breathing heavily. They looked at the spot where the hound had been, then at Izuku. He stood his ground, the green lightning fading from his form. His body was trembling, not from injury this time, but from the adrenaline crash. He had done it. He had helped. He had saved one of them. And he had broken every rule Kate had set for him. He looked up and met Kate Bishop's eyes across the wrecked intersection. Her face was unreadable, a cold, hard mask. She slowly walked towards him, her footsteps the only sound in the street. The rest of the team watched, holding their breath. She stopped directly in front of him. She was taller than him, and right now, she seemed to tower over him. He braced himself for the yelling, for the punishment, for the cold fury he knew he deserved. Kate stared at him for a long, silent moment. Then, she reached out and poked him hard in the chest with her index finger. "You," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "have a lot of nerve." She turned to Cassie, who was now being helped to her feet by Teddy. "You okay, Cassie?" I think so," Cassie said, still shaken. "He pushed me. If he hadn't, that wave." She shuddered. Kate turned back to Izuku. "You disobeyed a direct order. You abandoned your post. You engaged the enemy. You used your powers recklessly in a civilian area. And you put yourself directly in harm's way." Every word was a hammer blow, and Izuku flinched, his head bowing in shame. I'm sorry," he whispered. "But," Kate continued, and her tone shifted, losing some of its hard edge. "Your analysis was correct. Your timing was perfect. And you saved Stature's life." She crossed her arms, tapping a finger against her bicep. The internal conflict was visible on her face. She was the leader who needed discipline and order, but she was also a pragmatist who recognized results. "Your brand of heroism is a chaotic, self-destructive, infuriating mess, Midoriya," she said. "And we almost lost a teammate today because I had you on the sidelines instead of in the fight." She looked at him, a new, grudging respect dawning in her eyes. It wasn't approval. It was an acknowledgement. "Back at the loft, you said you were a hero," she said. "You asked us to let you prove it." She offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. Point taken. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't praise. But coming from Kate Bishop, it felt like a medal of honor. "Don't you ever disobey a direct order like that again," she added, her voice hardening once more. "Next time, you feed me the intel before you go charging in like a maniac. We're a team. Start acting like it." And with that, she turned and began directing the team to help with the cleanup and liaise with the arriving S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Izuku stood there, his heart still pounding. Eli walked past him and gave him a curt, sharp nod, a gesture of respect from one soldier to another. Cassie gave him a watery, grateful smile. America just smirked at him as she passed. "Not bad, Green Bean," she said. Not bad at all. He had done it. He had faced his first trial by fire in this new world. The victory was decisive, but it had come at a cost. He had proven his worth as a hero, but he had also confirmed Kate's worst fears. He was powerful, he was effective, and he was dangerously, suicidally uncontrollable. Back at the loft, hours later, the atmosphere had changed. The tension around him had lessened, replaced by a cautious acceptance. He was no longer just a refugee. He was a teammate, a probationary one, but a teammate nonetheless. Kate tossed him a small StarkTech tablet. "We're adding you to the Team Comms network. I'm also downloading all our case files and known enemy profiles. I want you to study them. I want to know what that crazy brain of yours can do with actual intel instead of just battlefield instinct." It was a test. An assignment. A real role on the team. Later that night, as he lay on the couch, the tablet glowing softly in the dark, he finally allowed himself a small, tired smile. The gaping wound of his loneliness hadn't healed, but its edges didn't feel so raw anymore. He had found a new battlefield. He had found a new team. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to find a new purpose. He looked at the tablet, at the files for enemies like Dr. Doom and organizations like Hydra. He pulled up a file on Kong the Conqueror, the temporal tyrant Billy had mentioned. His danger sense gave a faint, almost imperceptible twitch. With a deep sense of resolve, he opened a new file on the tablet, the page blank and waiting. He began to type, the title forming under his fingers, a habit so ingrained it felt like breathing. Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 15. He had a lot of catching up to do. The aftermath of the chronal hound incident was a fragile dawn. Izuku was no longer a ghost haunting the corners of the loft. he was a component, a piece of the strange, chaotic machinery of the Young Avengers. The probationary label still hung in the air, but it was now a title with a path forward, not just a holding pattern. The first, most immediate change was practical. "You can't keep walking around in that," Kate announced 2 days after the battle, gesturing with a piece of toast towards Izuku's vigilante costume, which he had meticulously cleaned and repaired as best he could. It was laid out on the back of the couch, the dark green fabric scarred with the history of a war from another world. "It's a tactical nightmare. Zero armor, too many bits that can get snagged, and frankly it screams unstable loner who lives in an alley. Not the team brand we're going for." Before Izuku could protest that it was designed for speed and stealth, Cassie came bounding over, a shopping bag in her hand. "We, got you some stuff," she said, her enthusiasm a warm counterpoint to Kate's blunt pragmatism. "We all sort of pitched in. It's not much, but it's a start." Izuku hesitantly took the bag. Inside were several pairs of sturdy cargo pants, a half-dozen plain t-shirts in various shades of gray and black, and a pair of surprisingly comfortable, high-traction red sneakers that looked suspiciously like his old ones. At the very bottom was a dark gray hoodie. He pulled it out and unfolded it. Emblazoned on the chest, in a simple, clean white font, were the words Stark Industries. He stared at it. "Stark Industries? Tony Stark. Iron Man." America supplied from the kitchen, not looking up from her bowl of ludicrously sugary cereal. "Billionaire, genius, part-time savior of the universe. Kate has a complicated history there." The hoodie was probably free. "It was not free," Kate retorted, a slight edge to her voice. "It was tactically acquired from a lost and found box. Point is, it's civilian wear. Blend in. When we're not on a mission, we try not to draw attention." Izuku ran his fingers over the soft fabric. It felt strange. In his world, heroes were celebrities. Their merchandise was everywhere. Here, it seemed the goal was to be invisible until you were needed. He pulled the hoodie on. It was a little big, but warm and comfortable. It was the first piece of clothing he'd worn that didn't belong to his old life. It felt like a uniform for a new one. With his physical integration underway, his mental integration began in earnest, spearheaded by the 2 team members who represented its opposing poles, Eli Bradley and Billy Kaplan. Eli was discipline incarnate. He approached heroism as a soldier would approach a campaign. Every morning at 0600 sharp, he would be in the loft's designated training space, a matted area near the back wall. On the 4th day, he walked over to where Izuku was sitting, still half asleep on the couch. "Up," Eli said. It wasn't a request. Izuku, startled, scrambled to his feet. "You're fast and you're powerful," Eli began, his arms crossed, his gaze critical and intense. It reminded Izuku so much of Aizawa-sensei that he instinctively straightened his posture. "But you're sloppy. You fight with your emotions. That's a liability. In a real, protracted fight, emotion leads to exhaustion, and exhaustion leads to mistakes. Mistakes get people killed." He tossed the padded training stick to Izuku. "We're going to drill. Basic forms. Footwork. Parries. I'm going to teach you how to stand your ground without needing to level a city block to do it." What followed was one of the most humbling hours of Izuku's life. He was used to fighting monstrous villains, to moving at speeds that broke the sound barrier. But here, without his quirk, Eli had forbidden him from activating one for all. He was just a boy who had relied on overwhelming power for too long. Eli moved with a fluid, brutal economy. Every block was a potential strike. Every step was perfectly balanced. He disarmed Izuku within seconds, the padded stick clattering to the floor. "Again," Eli said, his voice flat. They went at it for an hour. Izuku, a quick study, began to adapt. He started remembering the hand-to-hand combat lessons from Aizawa, basics he hadn't focused on since his power had grown so immense. He learned to watch Eli's hips, not his hands. He learned to use an opponent's momentum against them. He still lost, every single time, but by the end of the session, he was lasting longer. He was blocking more effectively. He was thinking, not just reacting. "Your raw combat sense is incredible," Eli admitted, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. It was the closest thing to a compliment Izuku had ever heard from him. You see openings no one else would, but you lack foundation. Your style is all frantic offense. You need to learn how to stand behind a shield, not just be one. As they cooled down, Eli spoke about his own legacy. About his grandfather, Isaiah Bradley, one of the first super soldiers, a hero forgotten and abused by the country he served. He spoke of the weight of that name, the responsibility to honor it, to be a soldier worthy of the title. Izuku listened, and for the first time, he saw past Patriot, the stoic soldier, and saw Eli, the young man trying to build something honorable from a painful past. It was a different kind of inherited burden than One for All, but the weight was the same. A quiet, unspoken respect began to form between them, forged in sweat and shared purpose. If Eli's training was a lesson in grounding himself, Billy's was a lesson in reaching beyond the physical. One for All isn't just a battery, Billy explained one afternoon, as they sat cross-legged on the floor, a dozen esoteric books on magic and energy floating in a lazy circle around them. I've never sensed anything like it. It has a consciousness. Faint, layered, but it's there. You called them vestiges. Have you ever tried to communicate with them? Izuku shook his head. They speak to me sometimes. In moments of extreme danger. Or in dreams. But I can't just talk to them. It doesn't work like that. He remembered the agonizing silence from them when he first arrived, the terrifying feeling of being truly cut off. Maybe it can, Billy mused, his eyes glowing pink. Magic is about will. About focus. Your power is similar. It responds to your emotional state, your intent. Let's try something. A meditative exercise. Don't try to draw on the power. Just listen to it. Feel its shape inside you. Find the quiet spaces between the energy. Izuku was skeptical, but he trusted Billy's sincerity. He closed his eyes and tried. He sank his consciousness inward, past the aches and pains of his body, past the anxious chatter of his own thoughts. He reached for the familiar, crackling core of One for All. Usually it felt like a star, a roaring furnace of power. But following Billy's guidance, he looked for the edges, the quieter currents. And he found them. It was like listening to a symphony and focusing on a single, quiet violin. He felt the layered nature of the power, the distinct flavors of energy that made up the whole. He felt Nana Shimura's fierce, protective warmth. He felt Daigoro Banjo's boisterous, kinetic energy. He felt the second user's sharp, abrasive intensity. They were faint, like echoes in a vast cavern, but they were there. For the first time since he'd arrived in this world, he didn't feel completely alone. He gasped, his eyes flying open. I felt them. Billy smiled, a genuine, brilliant smile. I know. I felt it too. The energy in the room shifted. It harmonized. He looked at Izuku with an expression of profound awe. You're not just a powerhouse, Izuku. You're a nexus. A living bridge to the past. It's the most beautiful, terrifying thing I've ever seen. This new world, Izuku was learning, was full of such beautiful, terrifying things. In the evenings, the team would often gather, and it was then that his real education began. They would put on the news, and Izuku would get a crash course in the geopolitics of a world with gods and monsters. He learned of Latveria, a nation ruled by a tyrannical sorcerer in iron armor. He learned of Wakanda, a technologically advanced, isolationist African nation that had never been conquered. He learned of Atlantis and its mercurial king Namor, who was as much a threat to the surface world as a protector of the seas. He learned of the Kree and the Skrulls, vast alien empires now united under Teddy, their young emperor who preferred pizza and video games in a New York loft to sitting on a galactic throne. It's complicated, Teddy explained one night, as a news report showed footage of a Skrull delegation at the United Nations. My mother was a Skrull princess. My father was the Kree hero Captain Marvel. For centuries, our peoples were locked in a war that burned galaxies. My existence, it was supposed to be a symbol of peace. Now I'm supposed to rule them. Most days, I have no idea what I'm doing. I just try to do the right thing. Izuku nodded, understanding completely. Being a symbol is heavy. Teddy gave him a look of deep, empathetic understanding. Yeah, it is, but it was the tablet Kate had given him that became Izuku's Bible and his new obsession. It contained a treasure trove of information, a neatly organized, terrifying catalog of the threats this world faced. He read about the Avengers, the trinity of Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor. He read about their schism over something called the Sokovia Accords, a law that demanded government oversight for all enhanced individuals. It was a debate that mirrored the arguments around hero licensing in his own world, but with far deadlier consequences. He read about cosmic entities like Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds, and alien threats like the Brood. He read about street-level vigilantes like Daredevil and Luke Cage, who operated in the gray areas the Avengers were too big to notice, and he began to write. He couldn't help it. It was as ingrained in him as breathing. He opened a new encrypted file on the tablet, his sanctuary. Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 15. His fingers flew across the virtual keyboard, his mind buzzing with the thrill of new data, new variables, new heroes. His first entries were on the young Avengers themselves. He compiled everything he had observed, everything they had told him, into meticulous, frighteningly accurate profiles. Entry 01, Hawkeye Kate Bishop. Abilities, peak human physical condition. Master Archer, capable of utilizing a wide variety of trick arrows with near-perfect accuracy. Master Tactician and Strategist. Exceptional improvisational skills, no inherent superhuman powers. Analysis, Kate is the team's brain. Her greatest asset is not her archery, but her ability to process information under pressure and formulate effective, multifaceted plans. She controls the battlefield through placement and foresight. Her reliance on non-powered combat means she is acutely aware of positioning and environmental hazards. Weaknesses, physically vulnerable compared to the rest of the team. A well-placed surprise attack could neutralize her before she can react. Her primary psychological weakness is a deep-seated fear of letting her team down, which can manifest as over-controlling behavior. She carries the weight of the Hawkeye mantle, feeling a constant need to prove herself worthy, especially as a non-powered human leading a team of titans. This creates a pressure point that a clever enemy could exploit. Potential synergies. Her tactical mind combined with my danger sense could be a formidable combination for battlefield prediction. Her trick arrows could be used to create environmental opportunities for my own attacks, e.g., sonic arrows to disorient, cryo arrows to create slick surfaces for high-speed maneuvers. He showed the entry to Kate one evening. She read it, her expression unreadable. She scrolled through the detailed analysis of her fighting style, her potential weaknesses, his notes on her complicated history with Clint Barton. When she finished, she looked up at him, her eyebrows raised. "This is terrifying," she said, her voice flat. "This is the most accurate assessment of my capabilities and insecurities I have ever seen. And you've known me for less than a week. It's like you downloaded my brain. I just watch." Izuku stammered, worried he had overstepped. "Keep doing it," she said, handing the tablet back. A slow smile spread across her face. "And do one for everyone else. This is the best opposition research I've ever seen. You're my new secret weapon, Midoriya." He flushed with pride, a warmth spreading through his chest. He wasn't just a weapon. He was her weapon. He continued his work with renewed vigor. Entry 02, Patriot, Eli Bradley. Abilities, peak human strength, speed, and endurance derived from a variation of the super soldier serum. Master of his vibranium alloy shield, utilizing it for both defense and offense in a style reminiscent of Captain America. Disciplined soldier, and skilled hand-to-hand combatant. Analysis, the team's anchor. Eli's fighting style is about control and momentum. He is the immovable object, the focal point around which the more chaotic members can maneuver. His greatest strength is his discipline. He will hold a position no matter what. Weaknesses, his fighting style, while effective, can be predictable. He is a shield, and a shield can be broken or bypassed. Emotionally, he struggles with the legacy of his grandfather and the pressure to be a perfect soldier. This can make him rigid and inflexible in his thinking, slow to adapt to truly unpredictable threats. His powers are also finite. He is strong, but he can be overwhelmed by superior force. Potential synergies. The ultimate defense for my all-out offense. We saw it with the chronal hound. He can create the opening, I can provide the finishing blow. His shield could also be used as a launch pad for me to gain momentum for a smash attack without needing to use float. Entry 03, Wiccan, Billy Kaplan, Hulkling, Teddy Altman. Abilities: Wiccan reality warping magical abilities, seemingly limitless in potential but constrained by his concentration and understanding of spellcraft. Can manipulate energy, teleport, create force fields, and perform a wide range of complex spells. His power seems to be tied to the very fabric of reality itself. Abilities: Hulkling Kree/Skrull hybrid physiology. Possesses superhuman strength, durability, and a potent healing factor. Has shape-shifting abilities, most often manifesting as leathery, extendable wings for flight and hardened claws for combat. Analysis: Team dynamic. They are the heart of the team. Their fighting styles are intrinsically linked. Teddy is the frontline tank, drawing fire and protecting Billy, while Billy provides powerful ranged support and reality-altering solutions. Their greatest strength is their bond. They anticipate each other's moves perfectly. An attack on one is an attack on both. Weaknesses: Their bond is also their greatest weakness. They prioritize each other's safety above all else, including the mission objective at times. Neutralizing one would severely impact the other's combat effectiveness. Billy's magic, while powerful, requires time and focus, making him vulnerable to surprise attacks. Teddy, while durable, is not invulnerable, particularly to energy-based attacks that bypass his physical armor. Potential synergies: Billy's reality warping could potentially be used to stabilize the dimensional frequencies of my home reality, if they could ever be located. His magical shields could augment my own defenses, allowing for higher percentage smashes with less personal injury. Teddy's strength is a reliable constant on the battlefield, a safe zone I can fall back to. The team's reaction to his analyses was a mixture of awe, unease, and grudging respect. It was one thing to know your own strengths. It was another to have them laid bare, analyzed, and cross-referenced by an outsider with the obsessive focus of a scholar. His notebooks from home had been about emulating heroes. This new analysis was about understanding them, integrating with them, and surviving alongside them. His integration, however, wasn't just about training and analysis. It was about the quiet moments in between. It was Cassie showing him how to use the ridiculously complex New York City subway system, her bright, optimistic chatter a balm on his frayed nerves. It was America, in a rare moment of vulnerability, admitting that she, too, knew what it felt like to be the only version of yourself in a universe, lost from your home. It was the entire team gathering to watch a terrible B-movie, their easy laughter filling the loft, and Izuku finding himself laughing along, a real, genuine laugh that felt rusty from disuse. He was becoming part of the strange, dysfunctional, fiercely loyal family that was the Young Avengers. Came to a close on a quiet evening, a week after the chronal hound attack. The city lights glittered outside the massive loft windows like a fallen constellation. Izuku was on the roof. A place he'd discovered was usually empty, a space where he could breathe. He was wearing his new Stark Industries hoodie, the New York air cool against his skin. He looked up at the sky. It was different from the sky over Muzurifu. The stars were in the wrong places. The moon felt like a stranger. The constant, ambient hum of his own world was absent, replaced by the thrum of this one. The homesickness hit him then, a sudden, crushing wave of grief. He thought of his mother, of her tearful, worried face. He thought of All Might, of his booming laugh and unwavering belief in him. He thought of Uraraka's smile, of Ida's rigid, chopping gestures, of the fierce loyalty in Bakugo's explosive anger. They were a universe away. A universe he might never see again. He closed his eyes, reaching inward for the comforting presence of the vestiges. Can you feel it? He thought, not speaking the words aloud. Can you feel our world at all? Is there any connection left? For a long time, there was only silence. The silence of the void between worlds. The silence of a severed connection. But then, something new. Not a voice, not a word, but a feeling. A faint, collective sense of resolve from the 8 souls living inside his own. It wasn't a connection to home. It was a connection to him, a shared strength. A silent promise that wherever he was, they were with him. He was not alone in this. He was the ninth, and the 8 before him stood as silent sentinels in his soul. A single tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek, but it wasn't a tear of despair. It was one of acceptance. His old life, his old destiny as the next symbol of peace for a world that was no longer his, was gone. That book was closed. He opened his eyes and looked out over the glittering, chaotic, dangerous, and beautiful city of New York. This was his world now. These were his people to protect. This was his new analysis to write. A small, determined smile touched his lips. His destiny wasn't gone. The call came in on a Tuesday evening, interrupting a heated and surprisingly intense debate over the proper toppings for a supreme pizza. Teddy was a firm pineapple advocate, much to America's disgust. The alert wasn't the screaming klaxon of a full-blown crisis, but a lower, more insidious chime Kate had designated for high-tech arms deals. "Got a hit," she announced, silencing the pizza discourse with a single gesture. The holographic map flared to life, highlighting a series of decommissioned warehouses on the Red Hook waterfront. "Intel from an old SHIELD contact. A group of XAIM scientists are meeting a buyer for some seriously nasty hardware. Phase inversion rifles, they think. Guns that can make solid matter intangible. Get hit with one of those, and you could fall through the floor to the center of the earth. Sounds fun." America deadpanned, tossing her crust onto the pizza box. "Let's go punch some nerds." "This is a stealth and extraction mission," Kate corrected, her eyes already scanning the warehouse schematics. "We go in quiet, disable the sellers, secure the tech, and grab the buyer for interrogation. No big explosions, no city blocks leveled. Stature, you and Hulkling are on aerial watch. Patriot, Wiccan, you're with me on the ground team. America, you're our ace in the hole. Stay out of phase until we need the muscle." She turned to Izuku, who was already on his feet, his mind buzzing. "Midoriya, you're with me. Your danger sense is our early warning system. You feel anything out of place, you call it. Loud and clear, but you are to stick to the plan. No improvising. No one-man heroics. Am I understood?" "Understood," Izuku said, his voice steady. The past week of training with Eli and poring over Kate's files had given him a new, sharper focus. He wasn't just a powerhouse anymore. He was a precision instrument. The ride to Red Hook was quiet and professional. Izuku, dressed in a dark, functional outfit capped with his new Stark hoodie, felt a familiar thrum of pre-battle anticipation. His danger sense was a low hum at the back of his skull, a sign of general ambient threat, but nothing specific. He sat with his eyes closed, trying to parse the signals, to find the sharp notes within the dull chord of danger. The warehouses loomed against the night sky, skeletal and decaying, the air thick with the smell of salt and rust. The team moved with a practiced silence that Izuku found himself slipping into naturally. His footfalls were light, his movements economical, a stark contrast to the explosive, groundbreaking style he was used to. He was learning. Kate led the way, a shadow among shadows, her bow held at a low ready. Izuku and Eli flanked her, a perfect triangle of tactical awareness. They slipped into the designated warehouse through a high, broken window, landing silently on a catwalk overlooking the main floor. Below, the scene was exactly as described. A small group of men in faded yellow AIM jumpsuits stood beside a heavy-duty crate. Opposite them stood a single figure, their back to the catwalk. The buyer. They were tall and slender, cloaked in a long, dark coat with a high collar that obscured their features. The air around them seemed to shimmer, as if distorted by heat. "Target acquired," Kate whispered into her comms. "Wiccan, can you get a read on the buyer?" "Negative." Billy's voice came back, strained. "There's some kind of dampening field around him. I can't sense anything. It's like trying to look into a black hole." Izuku's danger sense, which had been a low hum, suddenly sharpened. A cold spike of dread, specific and directed, lanced through his mind. "It's a trap," Izuku hissed, his voice tight. "The buyer, he's the threat." He barely got the words out before all hell broke loose. The figure below didn't turn. He simply chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that echoed unnervingly in the vast space. "Took you long enough, little anomaly." With a flick of his wrist, the crate containing the phase rifles exploded. not in a fiery blast, but in a silent implosion of twisting metal and splintered wood. The IM scientists screamed, their bodies flickering violently before dissolving into shimmering, static-like particles. They weren't killed. They were erased. Hostile revealed! All teams, engage! Kate yelled, loosing an arrow at the figure below. The arrow, a standard high-tensile point, flew true. But as it neared the cloaked figure, it seemed to slow, its trajectory bending. It curved in midair as if caught in a strange gravity well and clattered harmlessly to the concrete floor a dozen feet away. The figure finally turned, and Izuku felt his blood run cold. He wasn't wearing a mask. His face was a swirling, indecipherable vortex of fractured light and shadow, like a broken television screen displaying every channel at once. His form was humanoid, but it seemed to ripple and warp at the edges, refusing to hold a consistent shape. He wore a sleek, dark gray bodysuit under the coat, lines of pulsing blue light tracing across it. "My master is disappointed," the creature said, its voice a discordant chorus of pitches, a dozen voices speaking as one. "He sends a chronal hound to retrieve a simple temporal anomaly, and you children destroy it. He finds this tedious. So, he has sent me to correct your misbehavior. You may call me Paradox, Master?" The word hit Izuku like a physical blow. The chronal hound. Calm. This was one of Kang's operatives. "America, now!" Kate commanded. America Chavez burst through the warehouse wall in an explosion of brick and mortar, a comet of righteous fury. "Time to punch a hole in your face, Swirly!" she yelled, her fist glowing with the power of a star. She threw a punch that could shatter dimensions. Paradox didn't even flinch. He simply raised a hand. A flat, black disk of energy, a perfect circle of absolute nothingness, appeared in front of him. America's fist slammed into it. There was no sound, no shockwave. Her power, all of it, was simply absorbed. Swallowed by the void. America's eyes widened in shock, her momentum completely arrested. "Your power is to traverse dimensions," Paradox stated, its voice flat and analytical. "You punch holes in reality. But I am the hole. A localized absence. You cannot punch what is not there." With a flick of its other wrist, a shimmering distortion shot from its fingertips and struck America in the chest. She cried out, not in pain, but in confusion, as she was thrown backward, her body flickering uncontrollably between her current location and a spot 20 feet to the left. She was caught in a disorienting spatial loop. Wiccan, seeing America in trouble, unleashed a torrent of pink energy. "Let her go!" A complex binding spell, woven from pure magic, shot towards Paradox. But the villain simply tilted its head. "Magic! The art of imposing one's will upon the rules of reality. A fascinating, if primitive, concept." The pink energy hit him and sizzled, like water on a hot pan. It didn't bind him, it unraveled, the complex weave of the spell dissolving into chaotic, raw energy that dissipated harmlessly. "My will is to unmake the rules," Paradox hissed. "Your parlor tricks are predicated on a reality that, in my presence, no longer applies." This was wrong. Terribly wrong. This wasn't just a powerful villain. This was a conceptual threat. A living negation. Izuku watched, his mind racing faster than it ever had before, every fiber of his being screaming at the wrongness of this enemy. He wasn't just powerful. He was an anti-power. He was taking the young Avengers' greatest strengths and turning them into weaknesses. America's dimension-shattering punches were useless. Billy's reality-warping magic was being unwritten. "Patriot! Midoriya! Plan B!" Kate yelled, firing a volley of arrows. An explosive arrow, a smoke arrow, a sonic arrow. Paradox waved a lazy hand, and the space around it warped. The explosive arrow detonated prematurely. The smoke was sucked into a miniature vortex and vanished. The sonic blast was inverted, creating a bubble of absolute, deafening silence around the villain. Eli moved, his shield raised. "He's a living countermeasure. We need to overwhelm him with pure physical force," he charged, Kate providing cover fire. Izuku, his heart hammering, followed Eli's lead. He activated One for All, the familiar green lightning crackling around him. He felt the reassuring power swell in his limbs. This, at least, was real. This was pure force. It couldn't be unwritten. As they closed the distance, Paradox finally focused its swirling, non-existent gaze on Izuku. Ah! It purred, the sound scraping at Izuku's nerves. The anomaly itself. One for all. How quaint. A cascading legacy of self-sacrifice. A chain of martyrs, each one passing their burden to the next, deluding themselves into calling it a gift. The words were a physical blow. They were targeted. They were personal. Eli reached him first, swinging his shield in a powerful arc. Paradox sidestepped with impossible grace, its form flickering. It moved not like it was dodging, but like it was momentarily occupying a space where Eli's shield wasn't going to be. The soldier, Paradox mused, its attention still mostly on Izuku. So desperate to live up to a legacy your country tried to bury. You fight for honor, for discipline, but what is discipline in the face of chaos? What is a shield against the void? It tapped Eli's shield with a single, shimmering finger. The vibranium rang out, not with its characteristic energy-absorbing thud, but with a sharp, discordant clang. A network of fractal, blue lines spread across the shield's surface. Your shield absorbs kinetic energy, Paradox stated. So, I will give it a concept instead. I give it the concept of brittle dot. Eli's eyes widened in horror. He swung his shield again, and as it moved, a terrible cracking sound echoed through the warehouse. A fissure appeared on the face of the invincible shield. This enemy was a nightmare. It wasn't just fighting them, it was deconstructing them, pulling apart the very ideas of who they were. And then, it turned its full, horrifying attention to Izuku. And you, it said, taking a step towards him. The little hero. The ninth fool in a line of fools. Izuku grit his teeth, pushing down the fear. He dropped into his fighting stance. You work for Count. Work is such a limiting term, Paradox replied. My master conquers. I am his editor. I find the paradoxes, the contradictions in a timeline, and I erase them. And you, Izuku Midoriya, are the grandest contradiction of them all. It knew his name. Of course it did. Kang's temporal scans. It had access to his mind, his history. You have the power of a god, but the emotional stability of a frightened child. Paradox taunted, its voice dripping with contempt. You cry more than you fight. You break your own body in a desperate, pathetic attempt to matter. You are a walking, talking monument to inadequacy. Shut up! Izuku growled, the green lightning around him flaring brighter. And the burden of your master, Paradox continued, its voice lowering, twisting into a cruel imitation of a familiar, booming laugh. The great All Might. The symbol of peace. Such a heavy shadow you live in. You idolize him, you mimic him, you break your bones for him. But you will never, ever be him. A raw, primal rage surged through Izuku, hotter than any percentage of One for All. This creature was taking the most sacred person in his life, the man who had saved him in every way a person could be saved, and was twisting his legacy into a weapon against him. You'll never live up to him, Paradox whispered, the words slithering directly into Izuku's deepest, most guarded insecurities. He was a son. You are just a pale, broken echo, flickering in a world that doesn't even know his name. I said, shut up! Izuku roared, and he charged. All of Eli's training, all of Kate's lectures on control, evaporated in the white-hot fire of his anger. This wasn't strategy. This was pure, unadulterated rage. He poured power into his legs, appearing before Paradox in an instant. He drew back his good arm, his right arm, and channeled a level of power he hadn't touched since his fight with Shigaraki. The world seemed to slow down. He could see the swirling vortex of Paradox's face. He could see Kate, in the background, yelling his name. He could feel the vestiges in his mind, not screaming in warning, but roaring in shared fury. This villain hadn't just insulted him. It had insulted all of them. 50%. He threw the punch, a Detroit smash aimed directly at the center of Paradox's chest. The air compressed in front of his fist, a visible shockwave forming even before impact. Yes! Paradox hissed, a sound of pure triumph. Give me your rage! Give me your reckless, self-destructive power! Izuku's fists connected, and passed right through. There was no resistance. No impact. It was like punching smoke. His arm, carrying the force of a freight train, went straight through Paradox's chest. The villain's form dissolved around his fist, a shimmer of distorted light. The momentum, with nothing to stop it, was catastrophic. Izuku was thrown completely off balance, stumbling forward. His own power, with no target to transfer its kinetic energy to, rebounded violently up his arm. He felt a sickening crack as his radius and ulna fractured under the strain. Pain, white-hot and blinding, exploded from his wrist to his shoulder. He cried out, stumbling to his knees, clutching his now useless right arm. He had broken it. Again. He had let his anger get the better of him, and he had broken himself, just like the villain said he would. Paradox reformed behind him, completely unharmed. Predictable. It sighed. All that power, and you are still your own worst enemy. You see? I don't need to defeat you. I just need to let you defeat yourself. It raised a hand, shimmering energy gathering in its palm, preparing to deliver a final, conceptual blow. Izuku was on his knees, defenseless, his vision blurring with pain and tears of frustration. He had failed. He had let them all down. Get away from him! A voice, disciplined and furious, cut through the air. Eli Bradley, his cracked shield held high, charged forward. He ignored the damage to his primary weapon, ignored the conceptual nightmare they were facing. He saw a teammate on the ground, and he moved to defend him. His charge was a feint. As Paradox turned its attention to him, Eli slammed the bottom edge of his shield into the concrete floor. The vibranium, though cracked, rang like a bell. The shockwave wasn't an attack, it was a distraction. A signal, and Kate Bishop, ever the strategist, understood. From the catwalk above, she loosed an arrow. It wasn't aimed at Paradox. It was aimed at the massive industrial chain hoist hanging from the ceiling directly above the villain. The arrow was tipped with a high-frequency sonic emitter. The arrow struck the chain. It didn't explode. It vibrated, unleashing a piercing, multi-frequency shriek that filled the warehouse. For the first time, Paradox reacted with what looked like pain. The swirling vortex of its face destabilized, the patterns becoming frantic and chaotic. The blue lines on its suit flickered violently. Sound! It hissed, its multi-tonal voice fracturing. Unpatterned vibration, chaos, it disrupts my coherence. It was a weakness. A tiny, fractional weakness, but it was there. Its power was to deconstruct patterns, to unmake rules. But pure, chaotic noise had no pattern to deconstruct. It was anathema to its very being. Now Izuku! Eli yelled, planting himself in front of Izuku, his cracked shield facing the weakened villain. The plan! Your brain, not your fists! Eli's words cut through Izuku's haze of pain and self-loathing. The plan. My brain. He looked at Eli, standing guard over him, his invincible shield broken because of this monster. He looked at America, still struggling against the spatial loop, and Billy, trying to reweave his broken spells. He looked at Kate, already knocking another sonic arrow. They were still fighting. They hadn't given up. How could he? His mind cleared. The anger receded, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. The muttering began, but this time it was different. It wasn't anxious or fearful. It was focused. It was lethal. Sonic frequency disrupts its cohesion, but it's adapting, restabilizing its field. A single frequency isn't enough. Need multi-spectrum chaos, light and sound. Billy's magic is raw energy, unstructured. America's punches break dimensions, that's the ultimate chaos, need to combine them. Eli's shield, even broken, can reflect and amplify. He looked up, his eyes, though filled with pain, were glowing with fierce intelligence. Kate! Keep hitting it with sound! Different frequencies! Don't let it adapt, he shouted, his voice ringing with newfound authority. Billy! Stop trying to cast spells! Just throw raw magic at it. Don't try to give it shape, just pure, chaotic energy. America! Don't punch it, punch the space around it. Break reality near it. His eyes met Eli's. Eli! Your shield! It's cracked. It won't reflect cleanly anymore. It'll shatter the sound and light, make it more chaotic. Use it like a prism, not a wall. It was a crazy, desperate plan, built on a half-second of observation. But it was a plan. The young Avengers, hearing the conviction in his voice, didn't hesitate. They trusted the analyst. Kate loosed 3 arrows in quick succession, each with a different sonic signature. The resulting wave of sound was a discordant, painful mess. Paradox staggered back, its form flickering wildly. Billy, understanding instantly, stopped chanting. He thrust his hands forward, and a beam of pure, unstructured pink chaos, roiling and untamed, shot towards the villain. America, a fierce grin on her face, finally broke free of her loop. Instead of punching Paradox, she punched the air a foot to its left. A star-shaped crack appeared in reality, the edges leaking pure, dimensional chaos. Paradox shrieked, a sound of static and agony, as the waves of chaos, sonic, magical, and dimensional, washed over it. Its form began to break apart. "Eli, now!" Izuku yelled. Eli charged forward and slammed his cracked shield into the confluence of chaotic energies. The shield, true to Izuku's theory, didn't just reflect the energies. It shattered them, refracting them into 1,000 splintered, unpredictable vectors, creating an inescapable cage of pure chaos around Paradox. "Impossible!" Paradox screamed, its form dissolving, unable to maintain its integrity against an assault that had no rules to unmake. "The Master will not be. This is not." The end. With a final, violent implosion of static and light, it was gone. Vanished. Not dead, Izuku suspected. But defeated. Banished. Silence fell upon the warehouse, broken only by the panting of the exhausted heroes and the faint, pained whimpers Izuku couldn't suppress. He had done it. His plan had worked. But the cost was written in the fresh pain in his shattered arm and the cracks running through Patriot's legendary shield. Eli turned and offered a hand, his non-shield hand, to Izuku. "Up, soldier," he said, his voice rough, but laced with an undeniable, hard-won respect. He pulled Izuku to his feet. Kate, Cassie, and the others gathered around. The victory felt hollow, the psychological wounds from Paradox's taunts still fresh. Kate looked at Izuku's arm, then at Eli's shield. "Your plan worked," she said softly. "But look at the cost. You let it get inside your head, Midoriya. You let it use your anger against you." Izuku looked down, ashamed. "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be better," Eli said, his voice firm but not unkind. He clapped Izuku on his good shoulder. "You fell. You got back up. You used your head and you saved us. That's what matters." Izuku looked at Eli, at the unwavering strength in his eyes, and a new kind of bond formed between them. It wasn't the explosive rivalry he had with Bakugo, built on a foundation of shared history and explosive competition. This was quieter, more mature. It was the mutual respect of two very different warriors who had found a common rhythm on the battlefield. One was the shield. The other was the sword. And together, they were stronger. As they regrouped, a sense of grim reality settled over them. This wasn't a random villain. This was a targeted attack from a cosmic-level threat. Kang the Conqueror knew who they were. He knew their powers, their names, their deepest insecurities, and he was just getting started.